Okay. See a good group of folks getting on. Thank you guys for joining. We'll have a whole bunch more that's joining us. We wanted to get started. I'm Kurt Kelly. I'm one of the leads for the Sunshine 100, the work that we've been doing here for a couple of years now, in conjunction with the Carter Center and the great work we're trying to do around the state, bringing different folks together in conversations. As you know, we have our lunch and learns. We have a monthly lunch and learn. This May installation, is going to be a fun one. We're going to have a good time on this one. I want to just tell you that we try to bring things that talk a lot about things that are affecting supervisor of elections, election processes, things that we're hearing in the community, areas that just try to bring people together for peace. A lot of times we talk from the heart, a lot of times we talk from the head. And today's going to be a combination of that because we're going to talk about the value of ethics and obviously the conversation around ethics. When I was in seminary, I took several courses. That was very important to me to understand this and biblical ethics. And I took a lot of courses around that area. And so when I heard about this and Jennifer said, I want to bring this in part of what we do. She's been very much engaged with working with youth in the Ethics Bowl. And this was her idea to bring our experts together here and to talk with us. And we have assembled a really good group of folks to talk with you today. I have to apologize a little bit. I'm in a t-shirt, not dressed up, because I just got a surgery yesterday on my knee. I got a full knee replacement, so I'm not on any heavy drugs, so I could come in here and talk to you. But I will tell you that I didn't want to miss this, and so we're really excited about having this conversation. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Lisa Lorenzo.
I'm going to turn it right over to Jen, who's going to do the bios, read their bios, and introduce us to everybody. But again, we just want to thank everyone for being on the call today. We know that you guys are busy, and we have a little update on our schedule at the end, so you have to stay on till the end. But I'll let Jen tell us who's with us today.
Excellent. Y'all, thank you for joining. And as Kurt said, this is my one of my family's favorite weekends of the year is either judging the high school ethics bowl or the intercollegiate ethics bowl competition every year. It's our kind of volunteer, it instills us with like hope for the future. We leave feeling really inspired. Um, and so I wanted to share this with all of you because ultimately what I found, and what I think my spouse would agree with is if we taught people how to engage in topics that generate like knee-jerk reactions but in an ethical manner and thinking through, well, why, and questioning their own, like, well, why do I think this? Well, what if this were true? Would you still think this way, or would I still think this way? That we would facilitate dialogue and really promote conversation and a deeper understanding. And so for those of you who have never had the experience of going to an ethics bowl or judging an ethics bowl, when I tell people about it, I'm because in people's heads, they have an idea when I say debate, and they're like, oh, I know what that is. And I'm like, so it's not that. I was like, you have teams like debate, but instead of scoring points for pointing out where your opponent's wrong, you score points for helping the other team be their most ethically thinking self and clarify their own position or clarify your position in contrast to theirs. So it really is about dialogue. It's about collegiality, and it's about what we do here in our network from my perspective. With that being said, I am very excited to introduce you to people who it's their job to know the ins and outs of these Ethic Bowl competitions. First, we have Rachel Robinson Green. She's an assistant professor of philosophy at Utah State University and chair-elect of the Intercollegiate Ethics Bowl. With over 20 years of experience in ethics education, she has published extensively on ethics, including her recent book, Edibility and in vitro meat, ethical considerations. We also have, and Rachel, welcome, and I'll pin you. or if somebody can pin her to the screen, that would be helpful. Next, we have Leo Kirby. Leo is the director of the National High School Ethics Bowl and a member of the PAR Center for Ethics, where they empower students to engage thoughtfully with ethical questions. And we also, from right here in Florida, have George Sherman with over 30 years of experience in character education and international outreach. He serves as the regional director for the collegiate and high school ethics bowls. And George is one of the people, along with Dave, who got me into ethics bowl competitions. Finally, we have Dave Monroe. He is a professor at the Applied Ethics Institute at St. Petersburg College, and he specializes in moral theory and applied ethics, focusing on the ethical impacts of AI in, my notes say, in kitchens. Is that correct? Yes?
That is 100% correct.
What? I can't wait to hear more about your research and contributing to Ethics Bowl competitions since 2004. Please join me in welcoming these outstanding individuals, Dr. Rachel Robinson Green, Dr. Kirby Sherman, and Dr. Monroe. Welcome, all of you. I guess my opening question, and if you have questions, please put them in the chat. But I am really interested in and if you can, describe ethics bowls to me from your perspective, from your professional kind of perspective, and why they're important, and what value you think they bring to you, to your students, to communities. Who would like to start?
I'm happy to. Uh,
Excellent.
thanks. Yeah, I mean, Ethics Bowl is like such a special activity because it's collaborative, yet it's competitive, and it gives students this opportunity to discuss real life ethical issues. The teams take turns analyzing moral dilemmas and responding to questions and comments from the other team and to the panel of judges. As Jennifer said, it's all about collaboration and reaching consensus. Unlike something like speech and debate, we don't assign views. So really importantly, these are all the views of the students themselves that they're bringing to these events. And we don't discourage changing your mind or agreeing with the other team. So it creates a really safe space to represent your views on these challenging topics authentically, which I think personally is one of the like key aspects of being able to really learn how to engage with morality is you have to start from a place where you actually believe in what you're talking about before you can get beyond and deeper into that. So like the objective and what I think is like so beautiful about it is that we're trying to teach students to do more than just think through ethics, but we're trying to teach them how to do it together as citizens in this like increasingly complex moral and political community that is our country. And in doing so, like we're teaching them to not only represent themselves, but to hear others and respond to others and people who have different views in a way that allows us to create better community and better paths forward. I mean, I would like to hear if anyone else has anything to add to that. But.
In the high school, there's a difference between high school and the collegiate. In the collegiate, they normally have a background in moral theory. And one of the problems in a classroom is in teaching moral theory is when it's done, so what? Whereas in an ethics bowl, they have to look through the lens of that moral theory and analyze what's going on. So whether you're saying, well, it's consequential or it's rule-based, those things suddenly have meaning when you have a case in front of you and you've got to apply it in a way that allows the judges to understand what your moral thinking is and your ethical thinking is. And I find that really exciting because two teams will have exactly the same moral position, but ethically they come to different conclusions. And so what they're presenting to the judges is how that conclusion arose. And I find that one of the more exciting parts of the competition.
Dave, Rachel, can one of you give an example for like, because I think, yeah, go for it, of
An
ethical
example of,
dilemma.
yeah,
Yeah.
actually, it's funny, Jennifer, you just queued that up perfectly. Most of you don't know. I got back last night from London. I took a group of students abroad for a study abroad. And before we went, actually, one of the students on the trip has been an Ethics School Bowl participant and a judge. And before we went, we shared the case study about the Elgin marbles and the question about whether or not we should repatriate stolen arts, which is an Ethics Bowl case. And the students all read through that before we went to the British Museum. And so, as we're going through the British Museum just 2 days ago, these students have been exposed to this sort of ethical problem about everything that's in that museum. And as they're walking through, they're like visually confronting the moral dilemma and really understanding it in a close and personal way. So that's, I think, not only does it give an opportunity to sort of concretize, the ethical theories, but it gives you a chance to really grasp onto the sort of the real world questions once you encounter them, because these are the kinds of case studies you run into on the street. It's not sort of abstract or idealized thought experiments. They are lived case studies that are pulled from the news. So they're really engaging with contemporary ethical issues.
That's fantastic. In addition to kind of bringing students like face to face with an ethical dilemma, like that's a fantastic example. What are some other strategies, like as scholars who are also cultivators of the next generation of ethical thinkers, either in high school or in college or both? What are some things that are in your that you're aware of that in that process? What's important? What are some effective strategies? What has surprised you or what hasn't surprised you with in this endeavor?
I'll say something there. So I think one of the most important parts of this activity is the part that is dedicated to responding to arguments from the other side, addressing alternative positions. So these young people have spent a lot of time in online spaces where uh, the discourse is just vitriolic, and the modeling that's being done for these young people is not good modeling, right? This is not how they should be interacting with others. But the Ethics Bowl really provides from practice all the way to the competition, provides a roadmap for how to engage meaningfully with people that you disagree with, and in a space where the students can see what are our common tools as human beings, right? So what our common tools might be: the use of reason, the ability to structure arguments, and respond to arguments using reasons, but not just reasons. I don't want to be I don't want to focus too much on reason as the thing that settles an ethical issue. Yeah, I think they also, in working together and in imagining what a person on the other side might say, they practice empathy and compassion. And so hopefully, as a result of participating in this activity, they're better able to go out and engage with people who hold different views in meaningful ways.
What is some of the challenges of getting, I think I would imagine that it's challenging to get an individual student to shift their framework to be open to the ethical considerations that confront us in just our day-to-day lives, much less teach them how to work in groups to then come up with with a a framework for understanding a problem collectively. Can somebody speak to those two different processes? Because I think that we have both going on here.
Sure. When I've been a coach for almost as long as I've been involved in the ethics bowl, and when you bring a team together and they go over the cases and they pick a case that they're going to start with, and everybody comes with their point of view. And some of them are pretty adamant, and other people are kind of flexible. But as they begin to discuss what are the real issues in this case, what is the key ethical issue, what are all the ramifications, they begin to see that other people have something positive that that they would normally be opposed to because they never listen. And as they learn to listen to the arguments of other people on the team, you can, I mean, that's the best part about being a coach is you begin to see, whoa, their brains are opening up and they're beginning to understand that people can disagree with you and not be evil. And even worse, they might be right. And so that's the fun about that. That's for me, that's the most exciting part. And then when as a team, when they go to defend they've worked through the argument that they want to make, and then they go face another team, they have that inside their head. They don't assume that they know the answer. They know that they have a good answer that they can defend. But if the other team comes up with the better answer, they can recognize it without having to negatively react to it. And I just find that opening of the brains and knowing that these kids are all going to be leaders someday, I think that that's a real powerful skill to give them.
Could I ask this question as we're doing this and sort of starting in this conversation about ethics? Because I think everybody understands what ethics is. I don't know. I would think that maybe what we should do is define the term. Again, I remember we would go from social conventions to moral constructs to the law to reason, and then into higher ethics, higher ethical thinking, all of those things as you went in. Of course, I would learn this from a biblical worldview perspective and so forth. Give us a working definition that the children or the youth, I would say, they would be given to understand, so that it kind of defines what's the end goal of having these conversations.
Kurt, I have to say that I'm so glad you asked that. I feel like I'm showing my age as I sit here and listen to all of this because I've never personally looked at ethics as being a collaborative issue. And I heard some gentlemen say that it was consensus, and I've never looked at it that way, but I'm not familiar with what we do in our schools with what y'all are calling the ethics school bowl. I'm not sure that I understand any of that. And one person made in their remarks that morality was a theory. That's foreign to me at my age. I might be in the wrong discussion group today. I'm very confused.
That's all right. If you find yourself confused when talking about ethics, that's the natural state of affairs, right?
Well, I don't agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, so ages back, Socrates pointed out that the really interesting and like sort of problematic questions that we answer are questions about our values. What it means to say that something's good or bad, or that something's right or wrong, or that we should take this, that, or some other course of action. And once we start to get past superficial answers, the sort that like are really easy to give, we start to see that different people have different ways of understanding those questions. And so part of what Ethics Bowl does is not to presuppose that there is just one way of thinking about good and bad, right and wrong, but there are in fact maybe multiple perspectives for looking on these questions. And part of the reason that Ethics Bowl is really difficult to define is because we don't want it just to be from one perspective. So the sort of cases that the students will look at in this competition and try to figure out how to resolve will involve things like professional practice in being a lawyer, or the kind of ethical tension that you find that AI generates for students in school, or what kind of norms friendship involves, and how you handle it if one friend discloses to you a personal problem that involves another friend, and so on. So it isn't focused on sort of big picture questions about what it means to be human. In all cases, it isn't focused on sort of like is there a sort of cosmic justice to the universe and that sorts of things. It's much more multi-layered than that. And it looks at the complexity of human life and asks students with different backgrounds and different points of view to try to think through these things together, right? So the point, frankly, is not to define what ethics is, because once you start to put your flag down in sort of one understanding of that, you close out some of the rest of the discussion. And part of the idea of Ethics Bowl is to enrich people's perspectives by helping them think around these really complicated problems. Would you guys say that's fair?
Sure. I'd add that when we're talking about when the word theory comes up, I think what people are referring to is moral theory, not a theory about whether morality exists, but the history of philosophical discourse on moral theory. So students will often bring to bear the work of thinkers like Aristotle or John Stuart Mill or Kant or contemporary care ethics or something like that. And that there's not widespread agreement in the ethics bowl about the use of moral theory. So some coaches think that we should instead be focused on things like moral principles. So rather than appealing to theoretical frameworks from the philosophical canon, we should focus on principles like autonomy, justice, beneficence, non-malfeasance, and things like that.
For those broader things. And that really, my experience of doing both high school and ethics, the high schoolers really dig in to those like broader principles that are in a way that is delightful, actually. It really is. I love to see how they're thinking that autonomy shows up in a particular case or something like that, and to watch them think it through and to take their conclusion and to derive at a conclusion. But even just and so and I really appreciate you taking us a step back, Dave. And Catherine, did that help like frame the conversation? I clearly didn't do a thorough job framing the conversation, I think, at the outset.
I would never imply that you didn't do a good
Oh
job.
no, it's okay. You know, we all
I'm having difficulty listening to this through my own lens. I'm 76, and so a lot of what you're talking about is not a concept to me because
yeah.
I see these things as being absolutes. So the
Well,
idea that we have high school people who are being taught concepts of ethics and concepts of morality is so foreign to my upbringing and my mindset. I'm really having difficulty with your conversation today. That doesn't mean anything other than I'm having difficulty with it, and that I am really definitely not of this generation.
well,
I just want to be
Catherine,
really clear, though, that there's no part of this that implies relativism or anything like
Wait a
that.
minute,
Like
I lost you. Oh, there you are.
what we're teaching the students to do is to we're not saying that like, oh, you could craft an argument for any position and they're all equally compelling or they're all equally sound, right? The idea is to listen to all the arguments on offer, and it may be the case that when it comes to the issue you're talking about, there is a sort of moral absolute. And but the question is just sort of the project is to find it.
and the
That's
key is
part of the project.
the students should be able to communicate their views effectively. I mean, we're not telling them what to believe. It's totally fine if they don't change their own beliefs about these issues, but we also don't want them to enter these conversations with being defensive or ineffective in the ways that they collaborate and communicate with their other fellow students. And so really what we're trying to teach them is how they can engage with these challenging topics in a way that is constructive instead of just shutting down those conversations.
Okay.
I know as a judge, I'm always uh, bemused when the team that articulates their understanding of a situation and their ethical considerations that they're bringing to it more clearly doesn't hold my own personal, like, oh, I would think about it this way, and they think about it in a totally different way, but they do such a good job and they end up winning they score higher in my when I'm when I am up there because they've done such a good job just showing that they're really thinking through whatever ethical perspective they're bringing, whatever perspective they're bringing to the match. It's pretty, it is, yeah, it's really wonderful. I, um, I was wondering if there's, we're kind of getting into this right now, like for older folks, because, and I really appreciate your questions, Catherine, because I think that I, I, I wrote on ethics, and that was like my graduate work was all on, the ethics of applied anthropology and ethical conundrums and that kind of stuff. So I think sometimes I forget to take a step back and think about like folks, how like the general population sees ethics and how they can integrate it in. And so taking a step to like back to what Kurt was talking about, like what is, you know, how would, and I don't know how to best answer this question. Maybe it's, or to grapple with this, maybe it's how would people increase their own kind of experience of the world as an ethical being or an ethical thinker? What are some practices that you might have given to students that would also the general public would benefit from? I'm sure there's been moments in the past 10 years where y'all have thought, gosh, we need to give this to all of America. Like I wish that Americans would slow down and like and pose this question to themselves or stop and take a breath and think in this way, and just in terms of integrating um ethical considerations more into their day-to-day life. What i- is there any kind of um, any ways that folks can cultivate their own like their own selves as ethical beings or
I think that the first step is just to talk to people. Um, I don't, I mean, it's hard to self-develop some of these skills, I think, if you're coming from a place where it's not something that you're used to doing. And so the first easiest step, in my opinion, is to find people who, even if they share the same views as you, just to brainstorm with, like identifying the stakeholders in any given question and thinking about how your view might affect them in different ways and identifying the reasons that another person might view a question differently from yourself, even if you never change your mind. Starting from a position where you're just trying to consider other viewpoints is really helpful, um, because then it humanizes, and this is sort of what we were talking about very recently. It humanizes those other views in a way that makes them more reasonable. And the act of engaging in conversation on these topics, I think, is another way to just like push yourself beyond sort of the ingrained views that you may already have. I know that like it can be really hard for me to identify like the places where I'm being stubborn about my views until I have someone else represent a different view really authentically. But I don't know. I'm sure that especially the coaches here have different views about effective strategies.
It'd be interesting to me is because, again, I study, you talk about Immanuel Kant and Augustine, and you can go throughout the church history and go back and see as far as Thomas Aquinas and all of these great thinkers, brilliant thinkers, philosophical Descartes, you would get into so the Romanticism periods, and then you get into Calvin and all of these different philosophers that sort of came into they come from such different perspectives. To me, then based upon that, you build a foundation of a thinking, of a worldview. And so that worldview then begins to see how you look at everything from that perspective. What's always amazing to me is when those worldviews come crashing into each other. All right. And you begin to say, okay, I think the scripture says, come, let us reason together. And I do believe there is a reasonable conversation that can take place where you can sit down and begin to you don't have to have studied Descartes to be able to understand, or to understand basic principles. But I think when you come into this to have these conversations, recognizing there's differences without, and this is the thing that I would teach people, without mitigating or devaluing the belief that you hold to, but challenge your own belief to make sure that what you're believing has the value and the equity to be able to have this conversation. And so I think that's a great thing, guys. If we don't begin to have these type of conversations in our culture, then I think we get into our little huddles and we decide that we're right, and that leads to just parochialism and maybe eventually warfare. And we don't want to do that. So I think there's a real value in having the conversation. It is interesting to me, though, high schoolers, it would be hard for them to I mean, you're going to see a biblical worldview that's got to be somewhat limited, right? I mean, I would think. And so I guess the question that I'm hearing Catherine ask is, as I'm sitting now, Catherine, you're 76. Hard to believe you're 76. I've known you only 50 years. But as you're saying, I have this worldview that's been defined for a long time. And I know yours has a biblical perspective, and you have that strong influence in there. I get it. I understand it. The question is, people that don't have that, how do you come back in and have these conversations? And I like the fact that they are having the conversation. So how do you have those and then get to a place where you're inviting more conversation?
So,
Yeah, Dave.
if I can just 2 points I'd like to raise. We've talked a lot about, or we're gesturing in the direction of the impact that this competition has on students, but that ignores a whole other group of people who are in the room, right? So the thinking through these problems also involves the judges and the person who moderates the competition. So volunteering in an ethics bowl is a really good way for non-students to learn about ethical issues and the way that young people think. And I think the most common takeaway for judges, and Jen, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that year over year, I'm so impressed with the intelligence of the young people in this country and their ability to be thoughtful. Because you hear this sort of like generational despairing about, oh, the youth of today, they're stuck in their phones all day. And some of that's true and well earned. But at the same time, there are some really intellectually curious and bright kids out there who want to talk about these questions in a really detailed way. So I think that would be good for non-students to see, right, and participate in. So I'm just going to open up an invitation. If any of you would like to judge at our Ethics Bowl, we'd be happy to have you. The Pinellas County High School Ethics Bowl.
I will.
Yeah.
Great, come
I'll, I'll,
on.
I'll pin you down. I saw Cynthia was in there somewhere too, so I'm going to
Yes.
count on the both of you.
I think too, related to that, Dave, one of the great things about the bowl is that it encourages intergenerational conversations where I think, students often are kind of jammed into micro generations on social media, right? Where they're only interacting with other people in a very limited age range. And the stuff that's sort of being targeted toward them is for people in that age range. And they tend to be kind of culturally illiterate sometimes in terms of like knowing anything about previous generations. But it's wonderful when the judges are from a wide range of backgrounds. So we definitely, in our ethics bowls, don't just want college professors. We want people from all across the community, different backgrounds, different age demographics, different demographics of all types. So that's when the bowl's the best, I think.
Yeah, the students should be able to communicate their views in a way that's universal like that. And I think one of the beautiful things is that they've all learned how to listen and not be defensive as they present their views and hear opposing views. So for the judges at our events, they're always like, I didn't expect them to receive my feedback so gracefully and incorporate it so well into their views as they then responded to the judge questions, which it's so easy to have a conversation with someone and realize that, oh, they're just not listening. But that's not something that's ever really an issue with the National High School Ethics Bowl, and I think that's really special.
I have a question. So going to Catherine's comment, let me ask you this.
Uh-oh.
What do they win? They win with points, correct? Whoever gets the most points. Okay. So theoretically, if there was a debate on something that there was an absolute, the person who wins or gets the most points isn't necessarily the person that has the correct view on things. You could have an
Your view.
incorrect view on something that's black and white and still be the winner because of how you listen, communicate, and debate, for lack of a better word. Correct?
I think that the great thing about the cases are it steers clear of, oh, clearly you should do X. Some things that's like like, I mean, like those questions, there's always a complication where two things are kind of colliding, like so do and I'm trying to think of an example of it where it's like, oh, I had an example, I lost it. Well, so take Dave's example of the museum. So it is wrong to steal. Western civilization stole a lot of beautiful things and artifacts from, across the country, yet now they're in these museums. And there is a common good of having like access where people can go and appreciate these artifacts and the history. And so there is some good there. So then having that conversation, it's complicated. And so a lot of are complex. A lot of the cases are complex like that. So they steer clear from simple like thou shalt not kill to like, more yeah, just the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, like um, yeah, that are far more complicated and complex, I think. Does that make sense, Lisa? And so yes, like who you think the person, I mean, I have shared in the like one of the teams that the groups that tend to win are the groups that are thoughtful, have their thoughts very organized, or help the other team better articulate their perspective. So it's not just about your own perspective because you each like are going back and forth. So it's like, it's
I
there's
understand
a
that.
lot of skills at play. Yeah. Did someone say that? So yeah, so and I put the cases and so did Leo put some cases in the chat. Are there any other um Russell asked so what are the outcomes for students and are there any other outcomes for students or for judges or for moderators or for coaches who participate in the ethics bowl? And is there anything like surprising that people have said that they've gotten out of it that you didn't expect?
I'll say something. I also want to add that university campuses aren't the only places where this is happening. So, across the country, and done some of this work myself, there are ethics bowls happening in prisons. There are ethics bowls happening in corporate settings and elsewhere. So it's also happening in middle school, in camps, summer camps, and things like that. So there are lots of places where these outcomes are occurring as a result of people participating in this activity. Um, and I think uh, we've talked about how active listening plays a huge role in this. You can't provide an effective response to someone else's case unless you're listening to them carefully. And I think being listened to has a really humanizing effect. So that was kind of the biggest thing when I do ethics bowls in prisons. I sometimes find like it's got this very humanizing effect. People say things like, I never really felt listened to before. I never really felt like my arguments mattered or the things that I thought mattered. Uh, and once they realize that like having this discourse can be both personally satisfying and bring them closer to others, then they want to do more of it. And I see that in every demographic that I work with, that they realize this is part of what it is to be human and participate in society. And it's fundamental for democracy is to give and respond to reasons. And then they just are hungry for that going forward, which is, I think, a great thing.
Anyone else?
George, do you want to speak to that? George, you've been involved with Ethics Bowl for so long and you've been so quiet here. I think of all the people that speak about the impact on students, like you're the best positioned to say that.
Okay, so you don't want to answer it. Somebody asked what happens to the students. Okay, first of all, the kids who are in the Ethics Bowl are kids who see themselves assuming leadership positions in the future. So it's not just random kids, it's kids who understand that they need to have a well-rounded skill set. And so uh, lots of them become lawyers. I had one girl, I wrote a recommendation to go to Brown to become a doctor. One of my old team members wrote to me from Oregon, where she was a consultant to the head of the Department of Health. They tend to go out into those leadership positions. Uh, One of our graduates is teaching in a challenging high school environment, and he created his own ethics bowl team in a school that's considered to be challenging. So they go out to they go into the ethics bowl because they've got that potential. The potential is realized, I think, as they learn the skills and learn how to think and learn to ask the deep questions. And so when they go out, just seems natural that they move into uh, leadership positions. Um, some of the kids that I've met when they were little tiny kids, and now I know somebody said they were old at 77. Well, I'm pushing 80, and it's still the most exciting thing that I do in the year. Um, but some of the kids are working for Congress people. They're their aides. Others are teaching college. Uh, One in Chicago is advisor to the human services director for the city of Chicago. So they all, I mean, I can't say they all, I'm sure, hopefully none of them are in jail, but the ones that I have contact with all seem to me to be very successful. And they try and say, well, it's because of the ethics bowl. Now, we played a role in it. But like I said, there's a selection process that the people that go into the ethics bowl want to learn skills that will help them achieve their life goals. So it's not surprising that after they get out of the ethics bowl, those goals are much higher than I'm going to go to work at the shoe store or I'm going to become a car mechanic. These kids all are smart, articulate, and I can't think of one that hasn't gone to college after leaving my teams anyway, or college kids who didn't go on to some kind of postgraduate thing for my college kids.
You know, George, I had a professor in college that said that he thought our model here in America was wrong. He said that we had these big classes and we come in there and do a lecturers type of thing. He said the Cambridge model and the Oxford model was one where you would, especially when you get into the graduate work, they would come in, you would sit down with a professor, they would throw a question at you, and then you would have to come back in a more thoughtful way. It sounds like to me this is kind of the skill sets that are being developed here. It's less about winning the forensic argument, the debate. It's more about the thought process that comes into the conversations, which, by the way, can be challenged. So when you're building a construct for an argument, and someone says, yes, but have you considered this? And their point is better taken, then they have to be able to introduce that into the conversation. That's a skill set that I think is being lost. Particularly, we don't see it on television, do we? What we do is we have one guy throw some comment out there, and we have five panelists that tell us why we were right or wrong in believing that. And so I think that if you're talking about it, developing a skill set of thoughtfulness and bringing different points of view into a conversation, being prepared to say, wait a second, I had to put that into the conversation. I think then this is a real value. Unlike some of the folks that have texted me here and said, I'd like to be one of those judges. I'd like to see some of this. I think that would be really cool because I
You know
think
what,
there's some strengths.
Kurt, what I really love is I was actually it was an exception where a judge um wasn't a fantastic judge, but it was very interesting because everyone was so protective over the structure of listening and having productive conversation and encouraging like clarifying of one's own position that there was a self-correction that happened even though this woman was very intent on her own position and letting everyone know it. Like there was like it was everyone in the room was like, no, 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 that's not what we do in here. Like this is a sacred space. Like we actually listen and don't and try and help the other people think through their positions more so that they can strengthen their own ethical thinking. I was curious if somebody is interested in if they have a child that's at a high school that doesn't have an ethics bowl group, how can they, who do they need to contact? How can they form one? Or if they're interested in the intercollegiate ethics bowl, how would they go about getting those going? What do they need to do?
I'm going to quickly speak about NHSEB, and then Rachel, I'm sure you can speak about IED as well. But for NHSEB, if you have a student who wants to be involved, the first thing to do is to check out our website. We have a competitions page that lists all of our current regionals. If there's a regional that's close enough for your team to participate, then all you need is a couple other students to join in, and you've got yourself a team and you've got yourself a regional. If there's not a regional close, then you should still get involved and find other students who want to participate and start talking about these topics. All of our materials are free, so you can start preparing even if you don't have a competition. But you should reach out to us at the PAR Center. You can reach out to me directly because we like to know where interested parties are. We are setting up online spaces to accommodate teams that don't have a regional nearby, and knowing where it would be most effective to focus our efforts in establishing new regionals is really helpful too. But there are 42, so hopefully there's one close. But
What is your
honestly,
website?
I will put the link here in chat
Oh, okay.
with the regional competition page up, so you can see all of our regional stuff. These are the dates from last year's season, or from this year's season, I should say, that just ended. But yeah, the most important stuff I think for Ethics Bowl, it all starts in the classroom. The competition's great, and it's a good place to like use those skills that you've worked on of listening and expressing yourself effectively. But even if you don't have a regional, I still think it's worth checking out the website, engaging with the resources we have there, and starting a team just with your friends.
And I'll say something about the intercollegiate. So something kind of similar. You can reach out to me directly, or you can go to we are partnered with the Association for Practical and Professional Ethics, and you can go to their website to find out more information. We also do a free virtual workshop every summer. And the details of that are just coming together. It's going to be in July, and anyone's welcome to register for that. And there will be sessions dedicated to all sorts of different things. If you want to be a judge, there'll be sessions dedicated to judging. There are sessions dedicated to case writing. So if you feel like you're aware of some ethical issue that you think the student should be debating, then that would be a good session for you. Using Ethics Bowl in your classroom, if any of you are teachers, there'll be sessions dedicated to that. So once we have more information, once we have the schedule put together, I can send along that information for anybody who might want it.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that. Karen, I know that you had oh, go ahead, Leo.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to chime in. If you are interested in being involved in an Ethics Bowl beyond volunteering or encouraging a student in your life to participate, we also accept case writing submissions from people. So if there's an ethical issue that you are passionate about and you think it would be worth having young people discuss, you should submit it through the portal on our website. Sorry for the interruption, Jennifer.
Oh, that's great. Karen, you had a question earlier. You had your hand raised earlier and I missed it.
Yeah, and I apologize. My question was answered by Dave, so I appreciate his expertise in this area. I just want to say thank you, Jennifer, for bringing this to our attention. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope that we're going to be able to. Out of the collegiate, out of the high schools, into everyday conversations. Maybe having instead of trivia night, we have ethical night, So, yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That sounds like a blast. We just need to get some
Right?
bars
We
to support
we
that.
can drink and do it. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you
Drink
so
and
much.
be ethically drunk. Joking. I don't
Thank you.
I love that. But I think that's a great idea, Karen. I think that having fun with it, one of my favorite people to think through when I need to clarify my own position on something, I have a very good friend who is a legislator, and she is also a legislator, Erin Grawl. And we have a lot of similarities in terms of intellectual development. We went like kindergarten through 12th grade and Catholic schools, like very like strong foundation there. And we come at very different conclusions, yet still we come to very different conclusions when we're thinking through things using different framework within that, um using kind of emphasizing different things within that similar framework. And the reason why I enjoy talking to her so much is because of those similarities and because of our differences. And because I always come away with a deeper understanding of what's important to me and like what and clarity around how I think through um dilemmas that would arise when we were in the legislature, or even, I mean, now she's just a friend, we're no longer professional colleagues, but if I have something that I need to think through, um yeah, it's really wonderful. And to Karen, to your point in the chat, it's nice, it's important because every our with the polarization that we have, and with people thinking that that you can't kind of find similarities across difference, it's important. Those relationships are very important. Yeah. Any other questions, y'all? I'm going to sign Cynthia up for the National Prison Bowl ethics prison competition. When she, that's one of her like she loves doing work in prisons and jails. So yeah, I like to volunteer her. Yes. She's on the call. She's just muted. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything that was surprising or anything that needs clarifying? Well, I want to give you all then in the final 7 minutes time to just give us some closing remarks on because we really hit everything that I was hoping to hit about, cultivating ethical thinkers, things that we can do as adults to enhance our own focus on ethics, ways that we can get involved. And so, yeah, if there's any final remarks that you have, just please, we'll sound off at a time. Dave will start. Actually, George, we'll start with you.
Okay, one of the comments in the chat was that we are in a bipolar country, and that's just simply not true. We appear to be bipolar in the news and in presentations because that's what gets clicks. But the vast majority of Americans mostly agree on most things. We all think children are important. We all think family is important. We all think everybody should be given a chance to be successful in their lives. Those things aren't, I mean, there's no group saying we want to torture small children and want everybody to fail. The problem is that we only hear about our differences and we don't hear about what we have in common. And I think that going through something like an ethics bowl for the kids that come out, they understand that it's not a black and white world, that there are black and white things in the world, but that the world itself is a mixture of grays and greens and yellows and purples. And the only way to see one's way through it with dignity and self-respect is to listen to the other people and figure out a way to work together on the issues we all agree on, rather than fight about the issues we don't agree on. And I think that's one of the values of the ethics bowl.
Thanks, George. George, you really brought to mind a study that Pew Charitable Trust did in 2022 that found that 72% of Republicans regarded Democrats as immoral. 63% of Democrats said the same thing about Republicans. But if they met anyone from the opposite side who agreed, who condemned like blatant wrongs, it increased their perception of morality of the other side. Because the truth is that most of us hold sacred, very common things and hold and have very similar values. So I really appreciate that. Dave?
Yeah, I guess I've been involved in ethics bowl in a number of different dimensions. I've coached, I've organized, I've judged, I've moderated. So the only thing I didn't do is participate as a student, um, ironically enough. But I do think, sort of circling back to the sort of idea that this isn't just a thing for students, right? That this is a thing for our communities, and it's an opportunity for community members to share their expertises and their perspectives on these different issues. And I want to, the point that Rachel made, we don't just want university professors. We want people from industry. We want people from the arts. We want people from every dimension of society to be there at the table, because the case studies will touch on so many different areas, that it's valuable for everyone in the room to hear what everyone else has to say. So we'll commonly have law enforcement officers or lawyers or art curators, county commissioners, local judges. I mean, we have all sorts of folks. And so not only is it a good opportunity for the students to hear their arguments, it's a good opportunity from the network, and it's a good opportunity for folks who volunteer at the Ethics Bowl to network with each other and create these spaces of conversation, that then go on after the bowl is over in many, many cases. That's how actually Jennifer and I met, through a neighborhood association, right? And so, yeah, it helps foster those relationships. And I think that everyone in this network is keen to preserve and uphold. So I think
Everyone in the neighborhood association was a judge.
was a judge. That's 100% right. And so I think it's an opportunity for this network to do good work, to get involved with Ethics Bowl. So just a sales pitch there.
Leo.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add. I do just want to reiterate how incredible it is to see these students. They're all so insightful, and so engaged, and they are all so willing to collaborate with each other about these things that are so hard to talk about. It's really a special thing to witness, and there's a lot of hope there. It's really great. So even if you're not comfortable volunteering, if there's a regional organization near you that allows spectators, I recommend that you at least go and watch, because I mean, it's a really special experience. It's worth doing.
Wonderful. Rachel?
Yeah. We live in a pluralistic society where everyone has different conceptions of the good. And I think in a healthy democracy, we foster opportunities to have conversations with one another and to come to understand why another person holds the conception of the good that they do, right? Why they believe what they believe. And the Ethics Bowl provides a great toolkit for having those kinds of conversations. And it's one that, in my experience, is modifiable to be useful in a wide range of contexts. So, for example, my husband and I run these ethics slams in coffee shops and pizza parlors and different places where what we're doing is just facilitating community conversations. And so there are ways, if you want to run something like this in your community to get conversations going, we can help you with some models for doing that if you want to reach out.
Karen, you're tagged in our
Yeah, I got to jump off, but yes, please get me in touch, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
ethics slams. That sounds great.
I'm all in. You can see this in downtown St. Pete.
Absolutely. All right. Well, once again, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. And I'm going to follow up with a lot of what's in the chat, and also some of the opportunities to get involved that Rachel, Leo, Dave, and George mentioned, so that if we want to bring this to life in our communities in Florida and across the states in which we have networks, we can do that. And I want to thank you all again for joining us. And a quick reminder, we will not be meeting in June and July. We're taking the summer off. We will be back in August looking at direct democracy and ballot petitions. There was a change in legislation this year, and really looking at what the science shows, what experts say about it. So hope that you can join us in August for that conversation from a political scientist from the University of Florida. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful, wonderful summer. Bye now.